The Chinese Communist Party is in the midst of a 4-day plenum. It's the most important event in the country's political calendar. It will aim to cement Xi in power for a third term. Joining me live now is Michael Shoebridge from the Australian Strategic Policy Institute. What's going on right now is fascinating. I know plenum and eyes may glaze over when I say that word, but this could be seen as on a par with what happened with Chairman Mao, and he effectively cemented power, and Deng Xiaoping as well. This is Xi's power play, isn't it, this plenum effectively?
Yes, Tom. So what Xi is trying to do is own the legacies of Mao and Deng. So Mao had China stand up to the world. Deng made China rich. And Xi wants to say, I own both those legacies and I'm making China strong. He wants to create and broadcast this image of strength for the party and for himself. And that's partly because there's so much weakness and trouble going on inside China right now. The economy across the property, finance and energy sectors are affecting the wealth of the average citizen, plus a whole bunch of wealthy Chinese Communist Party families. Xi needs to distract them from that and unify the party behind him before he goes for his third term in the party Congress meeting next year. That's what this is about.
And as a lot of commentators have noted, a third term without an anointed successor essentially is going to mean an additional term on top. The way the Chinese leadership has worked, we know the next leader for basically the whole term of the previous leader. So this will effectively, as we see it right now, give Xi power out to 2032.
Well, he's trying to make himself the only option. So he's identifying the party's strength with his own personal role as leader. That's got enormous risks for him because one of Deng's actual legacies that Xi doesn't want to talk about is to try and destroy the cult of the personality of the key leader, which was one of the disastrous things about Mao. Xi wants that for himself, but he wants to deny he's creating a personality cult. It's a real risk for him in the party, and that's why this really dry Communist Party language in the historical resolution he's pushing through is so important to him. It's trying to make him the only option.
Yeah, you mentioned going back to that. I mean, this was, for people that are China watchers, this is what Deng Xiaoping had to so delicately manage. He had his so-called historical resolution, and what that meant was he was able to say Chairman Mao had his place in Chinese Communist Party history and had all these achievements, but there were missteps. And of course there were disastrous ones. The Great Leap Forward, the Cultural Revolution. He killed millions of people, tens of millions of people effectively in China. And that's what would worry people when they're hearing this, that cult of personality that allowed Chairman Mao to reign without question, that Xi wants to reign without question as well.
Well, and his problem is we're seeing missteps with his rule right now, partly because all of that decision-making is in his hands. So he's bumping into the consequences of decisions he's making about the economy, and it's making it worse. So the reason that Deng dismantled the central authority of the leader and made it a collective leadership was because China got too complicated for one person to rule. And we're seeing that now with Xi. So he's got a lot of internal critics and a lot of pressures, and the external environment's got worse for China under Xi, with all the wolf warrior aggression. It's hard for Xi to claim global leadership when he doesn't even turn up to things like the Glasgow Climate Change Conference. So he needs this historical resolution to strengthen his hand in the party.
You talk about complexity. I mean, if it was complex back then, now, it's that on steroids, not to mention all the, modern money markets around the world going in and out of China. You mentioned, though, the economy. I mean, there is still essentially this grand unofficial bargain in China. People have their lives very tightly controlled, but the economy grows. Prosperity is increasingly theirs. They've lifted themselves up, really, but the leadership likes to say they've lifted people up out of poverty. If that snaps, if we see some proper economic jolts through the economy, what then for Xi's leadership? 2032 might not mean much.
Well, that's the danger for him, and that's why this nationalist card and identifying himself as the strength of the nation is so important. That's one of the explanations for the military intimidation and aggression we're seeing around places like Taiwan. Because if the economy's bad, that projection of Chinese power through their military becomes a more important card for him. And the economy is in trouble, and it is affecting average Chinese investors. There's a lot of exposure to the property market because they're all told that was secure.
Yeah, and that's the point as well, right? That's for a lot of Chinese citizens, that's all their wealth. We talk about the Australian property market and whether that's sort of leveraged. This is everything in terms of Chinese prosperity, someone's retirement, and so on.
Well, and it's the wealthy party families as well. So let's not forget them. They're probably more important to Xi's hold on power than the average Chinese citizen's emotion, because the party's trying to control that. So it's the two things combining. The trick for Xi is, can he hold all this together to get his next term next year? And to do that, he has to continue to project strength. He's not going to turn from his international aggression anytime soon, because that's key to his power.
The sixth plenum, there you go. I know it's a dull title, but this is significant. It could be one of the more significant moments in Chinese history, depending on what happens. Michael Shoebridge, appreciate your time today. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Tom.